analysis and opinion throughout the show. Plus, I'll meet the man holding the World Health Organization to task, Chief Correspondent for Rebel News, Avi Yemeni. And as ever, my superstar panel here too. The former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, the conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 till 11 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Sorry I wasn't here yesterday. Did I miss anything? Anything happen? Boris Johnson? Really? Oh, you do surprise me. Fortunately, Toby Young is on it. He has a plan for what the Prime Minister should do to save himself, save his party, and maybe save the country too. Britain, as I always say, is the land where everything is policed except crime. But do the British police have to be quite so irredeemably awful and useless? Peter Hitchens has some thoughts on how they might don't all fall around clutching your sides all at once. I'm going to try to get through this next sentence without guffawing or collapsing into a massive titter. Peter Hitchens has some thoughts on how they might get back to preventing crime, as opposed to sitting on their flabby butts reading your tweets all day long. Vicki Spit lost the love of her life to the AstraZeneca vaccine. The heartless bozos of Her Majesty's government have now told her that AstraZeneca's commercial interests trump her interests, and indeed yours. And Peter Navarro is here. He was one of the sharpest members of the Trump administration, and that's one reason the FBI decided to make an example of him and take him down in handcuffs and leg shackles. Plus your views on, your views. They're the most important bit. Your views on the passing Charivari. gbviews@gbnews.uk is our email, or you can tweet us at GBNews. It's all coming up after Miranda Shunker with the latest news.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Glastonbury Festival is among the events likely to be affected by a 3-day national rail strike. Tens of thousands of workers are taking part in the biggest walkout on the network in over 3 decades. The RMT union says the industrial action will take place on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June. It's after unions and rail bosses failed to reach an agreement in a row over pay freezes and job cuts. Well, Rail Delivery Group Chairman Steve Montgomery is hoping talks will resume ahead of the strike.
Obviously, we're extremely disappointed with the announcement from RMT. There's clearly striking. No one wins out of striking. So it's really important we ask RMT to get back round the table.
Boris Johnson's promised to cut taxes and reduce the cost of government. The Prime Minister is asking his cabinet to find ways to cut costs to the public and business in an effort to try and boost the economy. The PM thanked his ministers for their support after he saw off a vote of confidence in his leadership last night. But Mr Johnson has been left bruised after 41% of his party didn't back him. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says it's now time for them to get behind the Prime Minister.
Well, we had a vote yesterday. The Prime Minister won a clear majority. It's time to draw a line, move forward and focus on what people want us to be talking about: housing, childcare, delivering on lower taxes.
From tomorrow, doctors will legally have to notify the authorities if they suspect a patient is suffering from monkeypox. It's after the UK Health Security Agency declared the virus a notifiable disease. Efforts are underway to stop the spread as more than 300 cases are confirmed in the UK. A man described by prosecutors as the biggest Nazi of the lot has been jailed for 8.5 years. Alex Davis was found guilty last month of being a member of the banned far-right group National Action. He co-founded the neo-Nazi organisation while he was a student at Warwick University in 2013. And nearly 1 in 6 people in the UK are now using food banks. Research by the Food Standards Agency says 3/4 of the population say the cost of food is a major future concern. More than 1/5 of those surveyed in March say they're skipping meals to save money. Well, on TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Steyn.
Thank you, Miranda. Did you see that about the monkeypox? The monkeypox marches on. Virus-wise, we're kind of in late February 2020 with this thing, so any day now it'll be lockdowns and then the miracle vaccine. Jabba, 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 said the monkey to the chimp. Go!
Dabba, 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 said the chimpy to the monk. Dabba, 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 said the monkey to the chimp.
Yeah, that song is 108 years old and we've brought it back. Jabba, jabba, jabba. Adele really needs to cover that urgently. As I've said before, I'm not interested in politicians except insofar as they are necessary to advance the policies I care about. On the left, almost anyone can do that for you. Jeremy Corbyn has spent most of his adult life cozying up to fellas who like to blow the legs off grannies at bus stops, and he's never had half the bad press that, say, a Tory backbencher gets when it's discovered he's getting 12 grand a year from some Ulster sausage maker he's been talking up to the International Development Minister. The rules are different for the right. You need a big enough personality to render the lefty media's attacks impotent. Hence Trump in 2015, 2016. He was, in certain respects, what conventional wisdom might deem a problematic personality. But precisely for that reason, he was impervious to all the usual lines of attack. So he could talk about issues the Conservative base actually cared about, such as mass immigration, controlling the borders, standing up to China, and the ghastly American media did their usual shtick and damned him as racist, and the racism charge bounced off. He raised issues Republican voters have waited decades to hear their candidates raise, and he won, because the sheer size of personality crushed the usual objections of the groupthink media. But it's important to remember it's the combination of the policies and the vessel that can advance them. So-called Trumpism needed Trump, but Trump also needed Trumpism. Boris Johnson was the beneficiary of something similar in 2019. After a third of a century in competitive journalism, he had amassed a mountain of sidebites, any one of which would have ended the political ambitions of the average leadership candidate. A week before he was appointed Foreign Secretary, The Spectator published a limerick in which Johnson suggested President Erdogan of Turkey enjoys shagging goats. But it didn't matter because it was Boris saying Erdogan was a goat shagger. And indeed, a fortnight later, Boris was in Ankara meeting with the alleged goat shagger. Just as Trumpism required Trump, so Brexit required Boris. Had, say, this week's coming man, what's his name? Jeremy Hunt, God help us. Had Jeremy Hunt won the leadership race in 2019, we would have had an ever weedier and more watery Brexit stalling in the Commons until an election was called, which he and the Tories would have lost. And which if he should achieve his ambition 3 years on, he will still lose, not just because he's an anti-Brexit globalist, panting hot for Chinese-style lockdowns, but because we are approaching that point in the natural cycle of democratic societies when the pendulum swings. 1997, 2010, 2010, 2024. It will require enormous force to arrest that swing. In 1997, the Tories seemed totally clapped out and exhausted, but we had a decade of Thatcherism to show for it. In 2010, Labour likewise had delivered to its base Tony Blair's awful demolition of the House of Lords, open borders on immigration, all kinds of things that please Labour voters. Conservative voters, by comparison, don't have anything conservative to show for 12 years of supposed Conservative-led government, except the uncompleted Brexit, whose opportunities have gone largely unseized. Right now, the way to bet is that the Tories will lose the next election, and after scheming his entire adult life to reach the top of the greasy pole, Boris Johnson will go down as just another floppo, stinko, forgotten failure of a PM like Gordon Cameron and David Major and all the rest of them. Why not gamble it all on doing something of consequence? First, put Partygate to bed. Yes, he had cake, and yes, he washed it down with bubbly. Hypocrisy is the tribute vice pays to virtue. And that's especially true in politics, like all those family values Tories of the 1990s hanging upside down in their bondage dungeons every Wednesday afternoon. But in this case, the virtue isn't in the least bit virtuous. The lockdown rules were evil, a wholly improper attempt by the state to micro-regulate the most basic social relations. More to the point, we now know those lockdowns were useless with respect to stopping or mitigating the COVID, but they did a grand job of destroying the economy and making much worse our cancer rates, our suicide rates, and the basic socialization skills of our youngsters. I suggested months ago on this show that the Prime Minister should announce he's quashing all the lockdown penalties and the attendant criminal records, because no government should ever presume to tell the citizen that he's not free to sit in the garden with his mates over a Victoria sponge and a bottle of wine. Boris Johnson should do that as part of a decisive repudiation of the biosecurity state we have lived under for the last 2 years. Bury the thing. I'm a flawed man, not just because I broke the rules, but because I imposed the rules in the first place. I shouldn't have done that. They are an affront to the most basic precepts of English liberty. And while I'm at it, so are my ideas on net zero. Oh, and that Northern Ireland Protocol needs to go. The only members of Boris's party who stuck with him last night are those who want some conservatism from a conservative government. That's the political reality. But Boris Johnson only cares about Boris Johnson. So look at it in your own terms, Boris. Right now, you've bought a one-way ticket on the Oblivion Express to Flop City. Billy Bunter becomes PM and gets done in by a cake. I read that when I was 9, and so did you. A move to the right is the only possible escape route. Let me know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk is our email address. Toby Young is the founder of both the Daily Sceptic website and the Free Speech Union, and he's written a fine column on the greased piglet of British politics as, what was that guy? Was it Cameron? Was it the Cameron guy who called him the greased piglet? Anyway, it's a terrific column. And Toby, that's really his only space to go now, isn't it, to the right? That's basically the 100 guys loyally sticking by him.
I think that's right. I think he has no alternative now but to tack to the right. He's been trying to appease the centrists in his party, the Jeremy Hunts in his party now for 2 years. And it was clear from last night that he has completely failed. There's no way he's ever going to win them round. They're just out for blood now. The only people who are loyal to him are people who want to see some proper red meat Conservative policies. So as you say, Mark, he needs to start by making it crystal clear he's going to scrap the Northern Ireland Protocol. He's going to ditch net zero. I think he should lean in to culture war issues instead of trying to sidestep them. He needs to actually start cutting taxes. He's been talking about cutting taxes for God knows how long. Even as a journalist, he was an advocate of cutting taxes. But the only thing this government has done is raise taxes. So he got off to a good start in his cabinet meeting this morning, asking the people around the table how they were going to cut expenditure in their departments. We need to see more of that. I think if he doesn't do that, if he doesn't tack to the right, if he doesn't start doing some genuinely Conservative things and shoring up what little support in the party he has, then he really is going to be toast within 6 months.
Well, I think there's cyclical things at play here, so it's going to be difficult to win the next election anyway. I read ridiculous things like, he's trying to shore up his legacy. He doesn't have a legacy right now, except for Brexit, which owes more to Nigel Farage and others than it does to him. So if he wants a legacy, regardless of whether he wins or loses, he should actually move to the right. That's the logic of his predicament, isn't it?
Yeah, and if he moves to the right and he's still deposed, then he can cast himself as a martyr to conservatism. What will he be a martyr to if he goes now? You said it in your introduction, cake. I mean, he'll be a laughingstock. He'll have barely survived any longer than Theresa May. I mean, what kind of fees will he be able to command on the after-dinner speaking circuit if he goes after 2 years of flaccid nothing? If he at least tries to do some properly Conservative things, then he can at least say he tried and failed. But actually, I think it's his only path to salvation. I think it's the way to win back those disillusioned red wall voters. It's the way to shore up.
Oh, I think we might have lost Toby there. Can we get Toby back? Toby, let me ask you this. I first met Boris Johnson, it's got to be 30 years ago now. You go back even further with him to his varsity days at Oxford. Boris is surrounded by complete idiots, as I see it at the moment. And who is he actually listening to who could actually put this stuff in his ear?
Well, I think there are some good people in Downing Street. There are still some good people in the cabinet. And I hope this is what they're whispering in his ear at the moment. I mean, the calibre of Boris and the people around him may not be sky high, but I think one thing he has going for him is that the calibre of the people trying to get rid of him is certainly not sky high either. I mean, we saw this in the most recent rebellion. They shot their bolt too quickly. If they'd have waited till after the Parliamentary Standards Committee issues its report after the 2 by-elections which the Conservatives are expected to lose, given how close the vote last night was, they probably would have succeeded in forcing a leadership election. But they went too early. Why did they go too early? Because it's a disorganised rabble. So he has that going for him, at least.
Yeah, but when you look at that rabble, I mean, there's a certain amount of thought that he's got all kinds of people against him. There's some people on the left, there's some people on the right. But as a practical matter, all the people they're talking up as the next leader of the Conservative Party are absolutely ghastly people. They're Remainers, they're globalists, they're lockdown fanatics. And I understand why people are sick of Boris, but whoever replaces him is going to be worse, isn't he? Or she?
That's right. I think the argument for Boris is the same argument that Winston Churchill came up with for democracy. You know, it's absolutely terrible, but better than all the alternatives. I mean, you mentioned Jeremy Hunt earlier. One pro-Boris Conservative MP described him last night as being Theresa May in trousers, but without the charisma. And he's about the best of the bunch. So I think that's another thing Boris has going for him. It's that there is no obvious successor who people can confidently predict would do better in the forthcoming general election than Boris. And, you know, he only has to cling on, I think, for another year or so. And then deposing him will be much more risky because we'll be at that point, you know, less than a year away from a general election. And deposing a leader in the run-up to a general election is electoral suicide. So they need to do it quickly if they're going to do it at all. And I'm not sure they can do it. So I think he has a chance here. He has an opportunity to reset his relationship with the people who voted for him in 2019. And the way to do that is to start doing some properly conservative things, actually lower taxes, scrap the idiotic net zero agenda, allow companies to start fracking again, lean into those culture war issues, do something about mass immigration, which is worse now than it was even before we left the European Union. Finish the job. It comes to getting Brexit done. There's still a lot of work to be done there, and that's another risk and another reason I think Boris might well survive. If you get rid of him and he's replaced by Jeremy Hunt, what guarantee do we have that Brexit will ever get done? So I think he has an opportunity. He just needs to fasten his courage to the sticking place and actually seize it.
But why are the two of us even having to suggest this? Because we've got a left-of-centre Tory party, we've got a far-left Labour party, we've got a lefty Liberal Democrat party, and we've got a gazillion Celtic parties, whether you're talking about the Scottish Nationalists, Plaid Cymru or Sinn Féin, who are on the left. And there's this big open space on the right. Why does nobody, apart from the DUP, go there?
This is an enduring mystery, Mark. I mean, Boris essentially successfully channeled that populist revolt on the right that led to Brexit 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. You know, he presented himself to those people who were disillusioned, unhappy, alienated, that he was going to be their tribune. He was going to level up. He was going to take on the elites on their behalf. And he's done none of it. Why? The only thing I can think of is that he can't bear alienating, you know, Guardian-reading neighbours of his in Islington. He doesn't want to be that bogeyman. He wants to be liked and loved by the liberal metropolitan intelligentsia. He wants to be able to continue to go to those dinner parties, to socialise in those environments when he's left office. He doesn't like being disliked. He hated being booed, I think, when he was on the steps of St Paul's. He hated it when Remainers surrounded after the Leave victory. He doesn't like confrontation. He doesn't like being disliked. He wants to be loved by everybody. That's his flaw.
Well, if it's as simple as that, maybe we should just maybe the easiest way to level up is to move number 10 to Huddersfield or Cleethorpes, and he wouldn't have that problem. Thank you very much, Toby Young. Your thoughts coming next. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Plus, former Trump advisor Peter Navarro and vaccine widow Vicki Spit and Peter Hitchens is going to be here to talk about the statistically entirely useless British police. Don't go anywhere, we're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah. We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, let's get to your take. What on Twitter says there are 4 groups in the Conservatives. Number 1, the faithful. Number 2, the COVIDers, who are peeved about lockdown or parties. Number 3, the right, peeved about net zero and tax. Number 4, the Ramonas, peeved about Brexit. The only one of those that Boris Johnson can mollify are the right. COVIDers might forget about it in a year or so. There's a lot of truth in that, what? And those are the 4 constituencies, I think. Robert says, can somebody please tell me what is the point of a no confidence vote if MPs don't respect the vote? And it seems you have to resign like past PMs. Well, it isn't really a confidence. The only confidence you have to have in the Westminster system is that you have to have the confidence of the lower house of Parliament. That's what confidence means. That's who gets to be Prime Minister. It's slightly iffy in the Australian system because the Senate you're also kind of semi-required to maintain confidence in the upper house. It's a little different in Bangladesh, where the members, quite disgracefully, the members of the party are not allowed to vote against their own party. But in this system, you're supposed to have the confidence of the lower house. We've perverted the meaning of confidence for these stupid opinion poll snapshots of the caucus. And it shouldn't be, we shouldn't really actually, that's not a real confidence vote. And I'm not sure whether it's, if you want a confidence vote, Sir Keir, Ginger Growler, then bring it up in the House of Commons. That's a message there. What else do we have here? Oh, Jane says, I want the Conservative government I voted for. A proper Brexit, an end to illegal immigration, and not this headlong rush to net zero, which is crippling us. Yeah, that's true. At least if you're going to go down to defeat, go down as a Conservative party. There's no democracy if you've got a choice between crazy left, far left, Celtic left, and squishy, non-conservative left-of-centre left. That's not democracy. During the Platinum Jubilations of recent days, I've had more than a few comments from Americans saying, how can you defend this system, Steyn? And then they point out the undoubtedly authoritarian bent taken by Her Majesty's governments in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and elsewhere these last 2 years. And that's all true. As I pointed out, the entire Western world is going to hell in a handbasket. But we have a choice of handbaskets. You can go in the handbasket marked constitutional monarchy. You can go in the one marked constitutional republic, if that's any consolation to you. And we'll all meet up at the big pile of rubble next to the roasting spit in hell. Nevertheless, even by the debased standards of the rest of the West, there is something especially disturbing about America's dirty, stinking, rotten, corrupt federal justice system, which is abandoning any pretense of equality before the law. The other day, a man called Michael Sussman testified under oath, in essence, that he had been engaged in attempted subversion of the 2016 election under the direct instructions of Hillary Clinton. Mr. Sussman skated, of course, because he's a Democrat. On the other hand, we're told there are people who attempted to subvert the 2020 election by wandering aimlessly through the halls of Congress on January the 6th last year. And for 18 months, they've been sitting in jail, many in solitary confinement, awaiting a court hearing to set a trial date for what's little more than a trespassing charge. A couple of days after Michael Sussman skated, my next guest was pulled off a plane in Nashville by the dirty, stinking, rotten, corrupt FBI, handcuffed, shackled, and slung in a cell. Peter Navarro is the author of Taking Back Trump's America: Why We Lost the White House and How We'll Win It Back. He was President Trump's Director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, and he's now also an accused criminal. Peter Navarro, it's great to see you. One does get the sense that politics itself is now being criminalized at the federal level in America. Tell us what happened to you the other day.
Well, first of all, Mark, it's truly great to see you. I remember fondly our interactions on Fox back in the day, and your show looks and sounds great. Nigel Farage is leading kind of a new wave in Britain. I'm at the center of something important to our Constitution here in America. We have a legislative branch, judicial branch, and an executive branch. There's supposed to be separation of powers. What we have now is a partisan Congress led by Nancy Pelosi that has chosen to weaponize the investigatory powers of the Congress against the law and in violation of the separation of powers, apparently for the purpose of keeping Donald Trump out of the White House in January of 2025, when, if he were to run, he would almost certainly be elected. That's the backstory. So we have this committee that subpoenaed me, commanding me to testify and produce documents. Now, in America, we have this thing called executive privilege and testimonial immunity, Mark. They work hand in hand. And it's the principle that in order to get effective presidential decision-making here in America, senior advisors such as myself need to have the assurance that we can talk freely to the commander-in-chief and other advisors. So this is a principle that goes back to the days of George Washington, and it's a principle that's been invoked in this matter, in this sham committee, so-called committee investigating the events of January 6th. So when I got a subpoena from them, I informed them it was not my privilege to waive and directed them to negotiate the privilege with President Trump. And I told him, whatever he decides, I will abide by. That seems like a civil approach to things, and also the legal way to do that. What has happened instead is that this committee would move forward and hold me in contempt, a charge which has a 1 year prison time per count. It's 2 counts against me. That's 2 years plus, in one interpretation, $100,000 in fines. I filed a civil suit last Monday, Mark, challenging that action, asking them to enjoin the committee and the Justice Department from pursuing this matter until we could adjudicate what are really important constitutional issues. I sent a letter to the Justice Department seeking a modus vivendi. I asked them to call my attorney. I talked to the FBI agent, Walter Giordano, who had knocked down my door the earlier week, banging it on it to give me a subpoena, and said, Walter, just call me, whatever you need, I'll do it. And they made a decision, Mark, at the Justice Department that instead of doing the legal and appropriate thing and giving me, somebody who served honorably in the Trump administration, some deference and respect, instead they took me at the airport with 5 agents, put me in handcuffs, took me to a jail, leg irons, strip search, solitary confinement, no food, no water. Worst thing of all from a legal point of view is I was denied a phone call to anybody for legal advice in the matter. And the funny, but I know you're into humor. I mean, the funny part of this is I literally live 50 yards across the street from the FBI. They could have called me. I would have surrendered voluntarily. They could have come to my apartment and taken me there, probably more safely than doing this in a public circus in an airport. They didn't do that. What they're trying to do is coerce me. And I'm facing probably $300,000 at a minimum in legal bills, which is why this book, Taking Back Trump's America, is important. I'm asking people to go and buy this now on Amazon because it's going to be the source of my legal defense fund, Taking Back Trump's America on Amazon. And this is where things stand. All I'm doing is standing up for my commander-in-chief, for the Constitution here in America. And your initial take on this was absolutely right. We have descended into a partisan jungle and reached a new low where our democracy in this age of lockdowns and forced jabs is looking increasingly like Stalinist Russia and Mao's and Xi Jinping's China. And, here I stand. I mean, look, I guess I'm a desperado, kind of dangerous kind of guy. We're standing up for the truth and the Constitution.
Well, the thing about it here is they're trying to tell people that, and they're particularly trying to tell their political opposition, Republicans, Trump supporters, look, if we can do this to Peter Navarro, who was one of the most powerful men in the White House, they can do it. You, little Mr. no-name guy in the middle of nowhere, if we can do it to Peter Navarro, we can do it to you. So they're doing the old Leninist thing of making an example of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in the public square. And they're just so wrong on every aspect of the law. My civil suit has 4 lines of legal attack, any one of which is correct and will win. And on top of that, they are compounding their problem by criminally punishing me, which, according to case law in these matters, this is unprecedented, Mark. Nobody has ever, on a contempt charge, been treated like this. I mean, this is like you go back to the dawn of the Republic. Nobody in my position as a senior advisor of the White House has been thrown in leg irons and treated like this. And by law, that's not what they were supposed to do. Their least burdensome alternative was to negotiate the privilege with Trump. Their second least burdensome alternative was to simply file a civil suit against me, as they did in the 2000s when Bush was in office and there was a similar kind of situation come up. They didn't do that. They just went right for the show trial Stalinist juggler. And these people pose a real threat to American democracy. I mean, this is very dangerous stuff, because if they could do this to me, what do you think is going to happen when Trump gets back in the White House and Republicans seize the House? I mean, the subpoenas and contempt charges are going to fly, and they won't be able to say, no, you can't do that to us. Well, they did it to me. We're doing it to you. That's the conundrum here. I don't want that. I want them to obey the friggin' law. They're not doing that, Mark.
No, I worry about this because you're not a flight risk. You're not going to steal a car and hightail it over the border someone who would do that is bizarre. And I get the feeling, I mean, I don't want to rattle you, but I get the feeling that if you'd been, when the 5 FBI agents descend on you and you get a little snappy with them, they're actually itching for an excuse to put a bullet in you say this is what happens when if you disagree with the Federal Justice Department, we'll take you down and I wish you good luck on this, Peter, and certainly I think it's outrageous that you should have to. I know DC lawyers, and I think 300 grand is an underestimate. It's likely to be, $500,000 and upwards. So do buy the book. But we're glad you're out of there.
If you want to help me,
yeah.
What can I say? But Lydia, I know you're a humor. There were some humorous parts. I mean, when they were trying to get me over to the jail cell, the FBI agents couldn't even find the right door to take me in. When they fingerprinted me, because I have really low blood pressure and a low pulse, the fingerprint machines weren't working. And then they wanted to take from my boxer shorts, like a tie that I use on them, because they're afraid I'm going to strangle myself with a tie from the boxer shorts. They couldn't find any scissors. I mean, it was like one funny. I mean, I'm going like, oh, and they're proud. It's like, ooh, that was the cell John Hinckley was in. You're in it now, dude. It's like, okay.
That's right. Right. I'd forgotten that. That's fact. He was put in John Hinckley, the guy who tried to kill President Reagan. That's the cell they put him in. It's a dirty, stinking, rotten, corrupt FBI and worse. Yeah. Well, good luck to you, Peter. You're up against a very evil system. The book is called Taking Back Trump's America. It has to fund ludicrously expensive American litigation, but I'll also say that Peter knows how to write, so you won't regret it. Pascal Sorier is one of the Queen's Australian subjects and the head honcho of AstraZeneca. We've tried to get his response to the coroner's certificates we've sent him showing his company's product as the cause of death. He hasn't replied because he's been too busy picking out his court dress for his trip to the palace to receive the knighthood he was awarded in the Jubilee Honours. Vicki Spit, by contrast, is a young widow in her 30s. You've seen her on this show. She lost the love of her life to the AstraZeneca. So while Sir Pascal has been picking out his togs in Jermyn Street, she's been filing a Freedom of Information request asking for details of the government's deal with AstraZeneca, giving them immunity for injuring and killing people. The Department of Business has responded as follows, quote, "The Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy can confirm that we do hold some information relating to vaccine indemnities as per your question. However, we are withholding this information under Section 43(2)A of the Freedom of Information Act, which states that, quote, information is exempt information if its disclosure under this act would be likely to prejudice the commercial interests of any person. The requested information contains commercially sensitive information with regards to contracts with vaccine suppliers, and we consider that the disclosure of that information would prejudice the commercial interests of the companies involved." Vicki Spit joins me now. Vicki, Her Majesty's government has just told you that the commercial interests of AstraZeneca trumps your right to know about the product that killed the love of your life, Zion.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting, isn't it? You don't withhold information if it's good information, so I can only presume that they have information which would put people off getting the vaccines. There's no other reason to not give out the information.
Can you appeal this decision by the Department of Business?
I'm going to try to. I have originally asked in a Freedom of Information request what the terms of the indemnity were, and they told me that was commercially sensitive. So with this request, I asked what would make that indemnity invalid, and clearly, as they've stated, they do have terms which would make it invalid, but they won't tell me because it's not only the commercial interests of AstraZeneca, but if you read further on, the commercial interests of government and vaccine suppliers are not damaged or undermined by disclosure of information that is not common knowledge. So, yes, it's the government and AstraZeneca.
Most people, I think, don't realise that freedom of information, which sounds a fairly straightforward concept, but in this case, they're not even telling you the names of the vaccine distributors whose commercial interests would be affected by this. This seems fairly scandalous to me because it was a unique situation where people from the Queen down were telling you to take the shot, get the jab. So it's odd on that. Since we last spoke, you've been on whatever that station's called. I think it's Talk Radio or whatever. Are other stations, other channels, are now beginning to open up to the situation that you and many others face?
Yeah, but we're still getting the constant. The vaccines are safe. It's very rare. Like interrupted every 2 words to be told that the vaccines are actually safe, and it's very rare, which is extremely frustrating, I must say.
Yeah, there's actually, if you look at certainly among some of the evidence from other countries, these vaccines are they would not have been permitted under any circumstances. In other words, the threshold in which a vaccine is deemed safe, which basically 1 in a million having adverse side effects. In this case, it's way higher than that, but they're still pumping these things out.
No, absolutely. I believe in America they actually didn't use the AstraZeneca because the trial data was incomplete. Which is one of the things I did ask in the Freedom of Information requests, which hasn't been addressed.
So you'd like to know why the AstraZeneca has actually been rejected in other countries, but was fast-tracked here. That's actually interesting information to know. On what basis were they given this indemnity?
Well, I believe it was for providing the vaccine at a lower cost. I'm not 100% on that, but I'm pretty certain that we got the vaccine at a discount. It also coincides with the point when AstraZeneca decided that the pandemic was now endemic and put their prices up, that we suddenly stopped using this vaccine.
So, yeah, you're right. You're saying that in exchange for a lower cost for the vaccine, they were offered an indemnity, the terms of which we are entitled to know about, because there are people like Zeon who died because of it, and there are many others who are seriously injured because of it.
Exactly. It's disgusting. If there are things they know about these vaccines that now they're not telling us, which could make us think, well, I don't want to put that in my body. We should be told about it rather than just pressured into getting them.
That's a very good point, folks. If they were transparent about this, if they were transparent about the tests, the trials, the risks, the benefits, the analysis they did, and why they gave AstraZeneca indemnity when that company's name appears on the coroner's certificate of Zeon and on many others up and down this land, in England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, then you would have a point to this. Thank you very much, Vicki. It's always good to see you, and you should not have to fight this fight alone. That's what's outrageous about it. So we would like it Thank you very much, Vicki. We will have you back, and we would like other stations, other channels, radio, TV, newspapers, to take up Vicki's story. Stump the Steyn looms, and Peter Hitchens on Useless Coppers. Don't touch that dial. We're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the...
I like that.
and the really important story.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah. We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, what happens next after the Tory rebellion against Boris Johnson? I'll have the best expert analysis and opinion throughout the show. Plus, I'll meet the man holding the World Health Organization to task, Chief Correspondent for Rebel News, Avi Yemeni. And as ever, my superstar panel here too. The former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, the conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 till 11 on GB News.
Oh, how useless are the British police? So useless that only 7% of crimes even result in a charge. That's not a conviction. That's just a charge or a summons. That's just a court date. So 93% of them aren't even charged. Peter Hitchens has been writing about this in the Mail on Sunday, and it's good to see him. Peter, you got a lot of pushback from people who know coppers and retired coppers and ex-coppers for your column.
Well, I get for a long time I've been contacted, particularly by older and retiring police officers who are full of grief about what's happened to the job they used to love doing and which they now find has gone down the plumbing. I've been writing about this for a very long time. I published almost 20 years ago now a book called The Abolition of Liberty, in which I explained what had happened to the criminal justice system of England and Wales, and why, in fact, it was a threat to the liberty of all that crime was no longer punished, which it isn't, and no longer prevented, which it isn't. And it was amazing. I discovered a number of extremely simple things which are very, very easy to find out by the most basic research in National Archives. And I kept on saying them, and I've pressed that book, The Abolition of Liberty, into the hands of a serving Home Secretary, a Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, a man who went on to become a chief of the College of Policing, and many other influential people in criminal justice and policing. And only one of them has ever written back to me or shown any signs of having read it. You can't get it across. People don't want to do anything about it. It's the extraordinary thing. We've moved from a system of actually trying to prevent and punish wrongdoing into a sociological mass in which there is really no such thing as crime. It's all behavior by offenders brought about by social conditions, child abuse, or whatever else it is. And the police now and the courts increasingly negotiate between the victim and the offender, so-called, as if they were more or less morally neutral between them. It's just an attempt to try and manage the level of crime and disorder in society rather than to bring it to an end. And what you cannot do with modern police officers, particularly, who are part of the system, is get them to understand what the job used to be when the job of the police was to be present on the streets and to be seen all the time, and by being present, to deter crime and disorder at its lowest level. And if you do that, as the research of James Q. Wilson has demonstrated, if you actually prevent the smaller crimes being committed, you prevent the larger ones being committed too. They simply don't understand what I'm talking about. They say, but we react incredibly quickly. I said, what use is it to react to a mugging, a stabbing, or a burglary? You cannot, having done so, unmug, unstab, or unburgle the person involved. It's happened. You're too late. And then they say, why don't you go for a ride-along with the police? Then you'll learn about what we do. And I say, I've been for ride-alongs with police officers in London, in Dallas, Texas, in Johannesburg. And they are exactly what persuaded me that this ridiculous reactive fire brigade policing was the most total waste of time. And the more you do it, what happens is that people keep on reporting crimes to the police, and they are less and less able to respond to them until the point is now reached where, frankly, they can't cope with the number of phone calls they get. And they just don't. And then there's the other thing, of course, which is that they get involved in, and have been caught doing this, the Parliamentary Committee has established this, they get involved in fiddling the crime figures so that they hide the fact that crimes committed and pretend that crime is falling. When what's actually happened is that by refusing to acknowledge numbers of things as crimes anymore, such as shoplifting particularly, and the taking and driving away of motor cars, and vandalism and all kinds of other things, you actually make crime normal. And you say, well, there's no crime because we've decided it's not a crime anymore. So the crime figures have gone down, not because these things aren't happening, but because we, the police and the courts and the government, no longer regard them as crimes. So stop worrying, eh?
Harvey Proctor says we need a royal commission to go back to Sir Robert Peel's vision and basically rebuild the British police from top to toe. It's a complete waste of time. It's a failure at the moment.
Well, you cut out the Royal Commission. Harold Wilson's, one of the few intelligent things that he said as Prime Minister was that Royal Commissions take minutes and last years. There's nothing that needs to be discovered. There have been commissions on the police within recent memory which showed quite clearly that the old Robert Peel system of preventive patrolling was still extremely effective. Nothing has ever been proved to show that it doesn't work anymore. It was abandoned for reasons of, I think, mainly laziness and a very, very futile attempt to cut costs, because the modern, very heavily equipped police are much more expensive than they used to be, by Roy Jenkins in the 1960s. And by stealth. It was never announced. Parliament wasn't asked to vote on it. The government never said, we're going to get rid of the policemen on the beat. They just did it. And it took ages for people to realise that they'd had this thing stolen from them. You don't need a Royal Commission. All the evidence is still available. Nothing has changed since the early 19th century when the system was introduced.
Okay, that makes sense. So, but skip the Royal Commission. We know what needs to be done, and I certainly miss Bobbies on the beat, village constables, and all the rest of it. Thank you very much, Peter Hitchens. Let's go stumping just quickly before they turn us out. Gravity Guide asks for my thoughts on the Bolton Theatre cancelling The Lady of Heaven due to Muslim protests. Tell you what, this is a very interesting story. We're going to do more on it in the next few days. Nigel did it tonight. But we are out of time. Never fear, Dan Wootton is here to titillate your Tuesday. What you got, Dan?
Mark Steyn, good evening. Well, I was very interested in your conversation with Toby Young earlier. We're going to have Matt Goodwin here, the political analyst, later on in the show, who has his own little plan. It's quite similar to Toby's, actually, as to how Boris can save his premiership. First thing, cut taxes. And also, Mark, there was this brilliant moment today, of course, with Lee Anderson, the Red Wall MP, actually going for the BBC live on air. He accused them of being responsible for a witch hunt against Boris Johnson. And he'll be here to talk all about that moment.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, he opened up what I believe the Americans call a can of whoop-ass on the Beeb. Don't miss a moment of Dan's show. He's the king of late night. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Rain overnight will be followed by showers on Wednesday, but always staying fine in the far north of Scotland. That's where a ridge of high pressure keeps things settled, but elsewhere, a lot of low pressure lurking nearby. One system pushing in through the